This episode is sponsored by Cash App. When your personal finances connect you to your funds and the things that matter, that's money, and that's Cash App. You know what else is money? Citrus splash protection, getting to feel like an archaeologist at work, and cinnamon stick chimneys. That's money, that's Cash App. Download Cash App from the App Store or Google Play Store to add your cash tag to the 80 million and counting.
I pronounce this batch delicious.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at Jack Horner's Plum Pies from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Now, stone fruit is in season in the summer, which makes plum pies an excellent use for underripe or underdelicious plums that are not yet in season. But first things first, we gotta make pie dough. For a double crust, we're combining 375 grams of all-purpose flour, plus 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt in a relatively medium bowl. Toss it around a little bit to make sure that the salt is evenly distributed. Then we're adding 275 grams or 2.5 sticks of refrigerator cold unsalted butter. Now, for every pie episode of this show, I've put to work a shredder, machine, or gadget of some sort, but I wanted to see how much harder it was to just break up the butter between your fingertips. And as it turns out, it was really easy to just rub and crush the butter into, let's call them larger than average blueberry-sized pieces. Then the only thing that's left to do is to hydrate the dough. Now, you want to keep everything as cold as possible to maintain a state of matter separation between your butter and your flour. So I'm starting by adding a 1/4 cup of ice water, mixing everything together, and then continuing one roughly tablespoon-sized splash at a time until the dough just barely starts to hold itself together. Then we're turning it out onto a work surface and gently kneading until all the flour is hydrated and the dough stops being so crumbly all the time. Then, this being a double pie crust, we must now subdivide it into 2 equally sized pieces, patting each piece into a big old puck, wrapping in plastic wrap and refrigerating for at least an hour, or up to 3 days, during which time we can make our plum filling. Now, as it turns out, plums can be deceiving, and once you've run your knife pole to pole around its pit and twisted it open like a purple-red avocado, you may discover that it's the wrong color. Because, silly me, I forgot that not all plums are cartoon purple throughout. For that, we're going to need some of the more fantastically named plum varieties: dapple dandies, elephant hearts, or these guys, dinosaur egg plums, which once cracked open weren't exactly the violent shade of violet that I was hoping for, but they're the best I'm going to do this time of year. So we're splitting and pitting 3 pounds or 1.4 kilograms, cutting each half into 3 or 4 apple slice-like slices, which we're going to dump into a wide, high-walled saute pan, which is then headed for the stovetop, where we're going to place it over medium-low heat, adding 145 grams of light brown sugar, the juice of 1 small orange, less the amount that squirts all over your person, and a present but restrained pinch of kosher salt. Then we're bringing this guy up to a simmer and maintaining over low heat for 10 to 12 minutes until the plums are soft and tender and becoming more liquid than plum. As such, much like blueberry pie, our filling needs to be thickened. So, stage right, we're combining a 1/4 cup of cornstarch with 6 tablespoons of water, tiny whisking into a slurry, pouring over our plums and stirring immediately to make sure that things don't clump up, continuing to cook for another 1 to 3 minutes or until nice and super duper thick. Giving a taste for seasoning, mine was pretty tart, so I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of plain old sugar, give it another taste, make sure it's got enough salt, and allow to cool completely to room temperature at least 2 hours. Now it's time to generously flour our worktop and get ready to start rolling out some dough, starting with whichever piece is slightly bigger for the bottom shell. First, I'm going to generously flour it on both sides and then start to press it out, sort of like croissant or puff pastry, which should help prevent the edges from cracking as we roll it out to an even thickness of 1/6 of an inch or about 1/2 centimeter. Then we're going to give both sides a well and good brushing off, gently pick up the round and drape it over our intended pie plate. And then you want to sort of lift and drop the dough down into the corners of the plate, not press or stretch, which can cause problems later on in the oven. Once it's evenly all up in there, we're going to wrap in plastic wrap and refrigerate until ready to use, or at least an hour. Next, rinse and repeat the rollout process with the top crust. It can be a little thicker, but you want it to be wide enough to generously cover the pie. And to prevent making a mess, I'm going to pre-cut the X-shaped vent in the center of the round. Fill up the bottom crust with our electric-colored, fully cooled plum filling, and then I discovered that pre-cutting the vent almost caused the top layer to rip, prompting me to deliver it by virtue of a pizza peel, which by proxy makes this a pizza pie. Sorry, I had to, and you know it. Once we've slid the lid on there, trying to keep the vent dead in the center, that's when we're going to remember that we forgot to brush the excess flour from our adjoining pie surfaces. So now's a good time to lift the lip and give it a brush to make sure that this guy doesn't explode in the oven. Next, Next up, we're trimming off the excess to the edge of the pie plate, reserving the scraps to toss in butter and cinnamon sugar, and baked as a delicious treat all their own. Then as one final safeguard, we're going to work our way around the perimeter of the pie, pinching, almost smearing shut, which will hopefully stop the crust from springing any leaks. Then it's time to crimp so that our pie has that signature cartoon pie shape. Basically just press one finger in between two other fingers, and that's really all there is to it. You can also pinch the edges to give the pie a more star-like look than wavy. Now this guy's headed back into the fridge one more time before going into the oven. Then after a final 20-minute chill, we're brushing it down with a mixture of 1 egg yolk, tiny whisked together with a tablespoon of heavy cream. Brush down every single square inch, leave no patch of pie unpainted. Place the pie on a large rimmed baking sheet to catch any potential drips, and then we're going to very carefully open the flaps of the vent so that we can insert a pie chimney in the form of a cinnamon stick. This is going to give bubbling steam a means by which to escape the crust, which will hopefully prevent any dreaded crust-ruining pie overflow, something that most of my pies have. This guy's headed directly onto a preheated pizza stone in a 400-degree Fahrenheit oven, where it's going to bake with the occasional rotation for 45 to 55 minutes until the crust is deeply golden brown. Now, I sprung some leaks on the side, but it appears as though the pie chimney did its job, keeping gummy fruit pools from forming on my hard-won pie crust. Now, once this guy is cooled completely, at least 4 hours on the tray or 3 on a windowsill, it's time to test it like little Jack Dorsey, mercilessly thumbing the center of the pie in what would be a very unsanitary taste testing measure in a commercial pie-making environment. And the filling tasted great before, tastes great now. I'm not sure what lesson was to be learned from that nursery rhyme. Maybe cut yourself a slice and eat your pie like an adult, Jack. Now, as you can see, the filling was still pretty runny and I didn't cut through it very well, so I lost some. If your pie ends up too runny, you can always fridge it and serve once chilled. And I gotta say, this was a pretty top-notch pie. All my past pie dough tricks might save you 5 minutes, but by hand seems like the way to go. The bottom of the crust was crispy in spite of the wet filling, and the top and edges were a veritable catacomb of buttery layers. Maybe use a little bit more cornstarch next time, but apart from that, I pronounce this batch delicious. Maybe just don't shove your thumb in it. Thanks again to Cash App. That's money, that's Cash App. Download Cash App from the App Store or Google Play Store to add your cash tag to the 80 million and counting.